Welcome to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan.
What, Sharon? You've become a marketing guru now, giving
What?
us big terms like Bharat on wheels, cracking rural distribution. Is this your new book or something?
No. What new book? I've not even written a single book. This is
Okay,
more
then
because people are talking about wanting to do, a lot of the business I speak to are talking about wanting to do rural distribution. So I said, might as well talk about it on CoBB.
so you've decided to don the consultant's hat.
You make it sound like as if it's something new you're going to do. You're just giving me heads up. That's the only difference today.
No, I'm doing this because a lot of the time consultants get away by giving these jazzy terms and guiding bracket misguiding companies to into these impractical strategies, and then because they are not involved in the execution, then they earn their bugs and they move out. So I'm not going to let you get away so easily this time around.
Thank you. You're starting off with a sixer. I have no way to defend it because I know what a lot of the consultants do. But okay.
Yeah.
So I get where it's coming from. So
So okay, so I'll keep challenging you on specifically execution whenever we discuss any fundamentals, especially rural distribution fundamentals today, right? I know you've spoken about distribution very passionately in the past
yes.
because that's one topic that you keep discussing with your clients. But more often than not, we have only discussed urban distribution, right? And it has its own way of being, its own rules, etc. But there is another unsung part to distribution, which is rural India. We know that it has its own peculiarities. So tell us, what do you think? How do brands crack rural distribution?
See, the beauty of rural distribution is that for marketing, brand building, advertising, there is always some kind of inspiration from the West. And that's almost a shortcut to figuring out how to go about business. While I don't completely agree with that, that's for another day. But distribution per se in India and rural distribution more specifically, that is a completely different beast altogether. There are no real ready concepts for you to import and execute in India. So you have to build it on your own. And very few people who actually do it document what they're doing so others cannot learn from it also.
Yeah. In fact, there are no imports, but a lot of the principles can be exported.
Oh, yeah.
To a lot of developing markets that may have distribution structure like India's, which is not very heavily dependent on modern trade. So, and the principles I believe are applicable outside of metros in all cities in India. Plus, you can take it abroad as well.
Absolutely. Because even when I worked in Africa, it was more resembling the Indian rural distribution than it did the Western modern trade setups. So I believe that's the only way you're going to learn a distribution if you do this in rural markets. Okay, I'll also give you a bit of a cheat code that I'm going to use today. I recently read the book Lilliput Land by Rama Bijapurkar.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard about it. Yes.
It's a gold mine of insights. So it wouldn't be startlingly new, but it's so data backed and articulate that it actually gives you words to put together the thoughts that you always had in your head. And so one of it is primarily that, do you need the strategy to fit the market, or do you want the market to fit your strategy? That's one of the critical questions the book asks. And I thought it was lovely, and I'm going to borrow heavily from that book today.
Actually, when you're young, when the brand is young, you search for market that fits your strategy so that you can get your product market fit. And then obviously when you become bigger, then you have to adapt to the market.
Yes and no. Yes and no, because there are some products that need to be born for the market itself. And the biggest problem that Bijapurkar addresses in the book is that there are a lot of multinational brands and even the national brands who are used to building brands a certain way refuse to adapt it. They'll treat it as an extension into rural and say, okay, now that urban is converted, rural will follow through. Or say, this is how rural happened in the Western market. This is how rural will happen in India at best. So that is the issue that she addresses, saying why should a market adapt to your strategy? Who are you? Is
Sure.
pretty much the question.
No, good. So therefore, I can hear some amount of that wisdom shining through, and hopefully, it shall be our guiding light today.
Reflected
Okay,
wisdom for all
the
we need.
reflected wisdom. Yes. Okay. So first things first. Now,
Hmm.
tell me, a lot of the listeners for our
Hmm.
podcast
Hmm.
come from ecosystem that services new age brands, startups, etc. Why should they care about rural distribution today?
Look, it's tempting to think that urban India is where the action is because that's what the news covers. That's what you see on social media all the time. And ironically, that's also the only point that your friends and family notice. So all the big cities, metros, the emerging tier one markets, they're growing, yes. But if you're in business and you want to grow, where is the actual growth happening? What's the true story? One point is that rural India makes up 65% of your total population. Two, rural India today accounts for 46% of FMCG sales. That's almost half. And we, the D2C and the digital first brands, are catering to the top 1%, let alone the remaining 50%. And third point is that the growth rate in rural FMCG, the consumption, has been double that of urban in recent years, even after COVID. It keeps, don't go by the quarter fluctuations, but as a trend, it's been growing at double that of urban. Urban is what? Growing at what, 2, 3%?
Yeah.
Rural is almost more than 5%, closer to 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is just the beginning.
I think those are stark numbers when you listen to them, considering that it is half the consumption.
Exactly. Their disposable income is rising. Their infrastructure is getting better. And this digital penetration, right, which is phenomenal. I met a farmer who orders his cattle fodder on WhatsApp and pays by GPay in Katni, Madhya Pradesh.
Nice.
And that is the Bharat consumer, if you will have it, who watches reels, orders on WhatsApp and stuff. So that's the life they lead. And you
No doubt.
can't keep treating them very different from what we're doing in urban.
Correct. No doubt. No doubt. In fact, in one of my visits to a town called Palasani near Jodhpur, we were made to stay there for a couple of days. And again, similar thing, like you said, that's a place where, what do you call them in English? Those grasshoppers create havoc for crops. And we found farmers using web to track their movement, consume content from various apps as well as YouTube on how to scare them, and then finding variety of instruments mechanisms online, paying via digital payment and getting it delivered done at their area despite sitting in one remote corner
Absolutely.
of a village. Yeah.
So because we have access to this information anyway, we take it for granted because we are wasting time on digital. They might be doing the same. The rural consumer is no longer sitting around waiting for subsidies. They've got it all. And they're aspirational. And they don't say, I want what the urban, what do you say, how do you call it? The remnants of what the urban consumers have left behind is what I'll have. No. They want the same brands as we do. They want the same experience as the urban consumers do. But they want it all tailored to their existing world realities.
Okay. Fair. Now, very rightfully said, they want it tailored to them. They want their own version of big brands, great brands.
Yes. And
okay,
this is a point that Rama Bijapurkar makes in the book. She puts it beautifully. She says, rural India isn't one giant homogeneous market you can address with, say, a single strategy. It's multiple tiny, uneven markets, each moving at its own pace and each with its own quirks. And you've got to solve for it in those fractions.
Well said. Well said. Okay, fair. So, and hence you're saying it's a large market. Any startup, any business should be interested in it, especially when you're wanting to expand to high growing segments in the country. Okay. So now, now that we understand the why, let's get into the what, right? When people talk about rural distribution, they think of potholes, bad roads, villages 500 kilometers away from each other. What else should people picture?
There is more to it than just infrastructure. So in Lilliput land, the framing is that there are challenges to rural India, and they aren't anomalies, as in those challenges will exist. Now, you can look at them as challenges, and or you can look at them as realities. But the truth is, you've got to design for those markets, whatever their reality is. And the brand that cracks rural are the ones that don't fight these realities and treat them as anomalies. They don't say, okay, this will change. I'm waiting for this to change. No. They will accept the reality and go with it. And they build up their systems to respect the reality of rural India.
Fair. And do you have any succinct list or something about those realities?
Yes,
I'm curious now.
Yes, there are 4 big fundamentals to rural distribution. And I'll go one by one. The first one is that fragmentation is normal. It is not a problem. So in India, in urban India, in the metros, you think there's density, right? When you have one distributor, a salesman covers about 240 stores in a week, roughly. And he usually, once he gets to his beat, he might not have traveled more than 1 or 2 kilometers. But if you look at rural, the fragmentation is by default. That is how the reality is, because of the farmlands, everything is spread out a lot more. And one distributor may have to travel, say, 50 kilometers to find the 100 retailers to sell. So that fragmentation is going to be. Now, if you say, I will build for density of stores, you will lose your business. It's not going to happen. You have to embrace this fragmentation and build networks that help you serve the scattered demand.
Fair.
So I'll give you an example.
Fair.
So there is, you've heard of this company, Elastic Run.
Yeah.
So what they do is they help companies, they're aggregating this demand. To say, I will service these, and they don't have a fleet. They have pretty much Uberized distribution. This is an urban company solving for rural distribution for other FMCG companies. So they say, these retailers want only small orders. I will have it delivered to them through wherever they are. I will have them delivered on cycles, on two-wheelers, wherever. No matter how bad the road is, their stock will reach. And they are not trying to say, how will I bring retailers together? Can my wholesale market feed them? Because I can't go so far. No. That's the reality. I'm going to help you address it. That is a great way of accepting or inhaling the fragmentation in rural India.
Interesting. So rather than fighting it or calling it an anomaly, it's about embracing it and solving for it. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I like the first principle or the first reality. What's the second one?
Second one is an extension of the first. Small is scale. Because despite the density of stores, the ordering in urban is usually in large quantities, in number of cartons, number of boxes. In the villages, they don't need so much because of that lower density. People also spread out, and you don't have as many people servicing the same stores servicing as many people. So if you remember, we used to have this term called DPL.
Yeah,
dealer per lakh.
Yeah.
It used to be around 350 national, and it used to be around 400 in the metros. In rural, it drops down to 150. So 150 outlets service 1 lakh of population. Roughly. That's the number it used to be. Maybe it's different now. This is again a problem which solves for a similar elastic run solution. But I'll give you an example from urban India for this, from our own history at Cadbury. When Cadbury launched Oreo, the reason Oreo succeeded so well was because Oreo was launched like chocolates. In chocolates, we would be scared to sell an entire entire carton of chocolates to a retailer because they're high value, low volume products. And biscuits weren't. So that inherent fear in the salesman made sure we kept only limited stock of Oreo, despite all the branding that was being done, despite all the advertising that was being done. The stock in the store was limited. And that actually made the market feel like the stock was constantly running out. And the service was a lot more frequent. Same thing here. Because your order sizes are small, And these retailers, no, they also extend credit to the shoppers. And it's even better for you to supply in smaller quantities. And growing these order quantities is not how you scale. You scale by multiplying these tiny points that you serve. So therefore, in rural markets, the small order sizes cannot be a limitation. That is the way to scale your business in rural.
Interesting. In fact, I'm reminded of my sales days.
Mhm.
I have two examples to add to this. Okay, pretty contrasting ones. Okay, I've handled Leh Ladakh. Okay, now Leh closes down for 4 months in the between November to March. Closes down. Now that is one place because you can't visit there by October, September. You start loading,
Hmm.
right? So you treat it very differently. You load, extend credit, let them consume. Once the consumption is done and the market opens up, you get back your credit, and by that time they would have consumed 4 months worth of stock. So that's one way. Yeah, where lack of accessibility requires you to load. Rural works the other way around. Now this is another kind of rural. Now I've also handled Himachal Pradesh and Jammu Kashmir. Okay. Now in Himachal or in Jammu, there are areas where the shops have pretty good throughput, but they're small shops. So therefore, the scale is in smallness, right? So these are areas, for example, the whole highway that goes towards Shimla, right? These are small shops. A bus will stop there, they will empty the entire shop. Otherwise, the shop will keep sitting on the stock for months, right? So therefore, the distributors there have their own elastic run, where the van goes from bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, keeps supplying stock, keeps supplying, and it collects the money on its way back.
Oh,
By
same
that
day.
time, same day. By that time, many of these shops have already sold off their stock and they're ready for another refill. Same things happen when you're on your way to Vaishno Devi temple. The whole lane in Katra, where you have these shops on the sides, those shops come up during the season on their own. So the salesman or the van goes, keeps supplying. On its way back, they collect the money. So they embrace this small order and the credit cycle that comes along with it and
Right.
make their business through it.
Absolutely. And I know you're talking about tourist locations, but another point I missed mentioning here was that these consumers in rural India don't do pantry stocking. They don't really have a space to store their toiletries and store their staples, yes, because they're largely farming households, but they don't really stock too much of FMCG products at home. They buy as per need. And therefore, your ability to load their pantry also is low. They will buy in small ticket sizes only.
Yeah. Similarly, the shops also,
Hmm.
you can't load too much. They have problems of, so the rats will cut into these packets, etc., etc. So they're wary to stock too much. So got the second one. So scale is in smallness. Okay, what's the third one?
Third one is accessibility is a design principle. So you could interpret it as affordability, but I want to carefully call it out as accessibility. And this again builds from the last point we're making that they don't buy in stock at home, consumers. And in urban, we always think of upselling, saying they're buying 150 grams, get them to buy 30 grams extra, get them to buy, once they buy 30 grams extra, then get them to buy the slightly larger pack so that you can load the pantry. That doesn't happen in rural. And affordability it's not just about a pricing strategy. It is how the product is to be designed for them because they are buying it for immediate consumption. And the biggest example I can think of for this is Chick shampoo. I think they revolutionized the shampoo category. I mean, I not think they did revolutionize the shampoo category by launching sachets, which now Unilever has taken to a completely another level. But making it accessible at a lower price point for immediate consumption is where it works brilliantly for them. And you can't say, I will do LUPs and there will be lower quality. No, nothing. You have to engineer for access if you want penetration to. I know it's not necessarily a distribution that you're talking about. It is a design thinking that will enable distribution.
Lovely. No, I love the use of accessibility over affordability. As you were saying earlier, they need access to great brands. They don't need cheap brands. And there are
Absolutely.
multiple examples, like you rightfully said. Within our portfolio, Dairy Milk Shots was made to make dairy milk accessible, not affordable. Yeah, it was still premium for per price point of chocolate. Maybe it was more premium than regular dairy milk, uh, but the consumer wanted it in 2 rupees, right?
Absolutely. Because the other aspect, even if we go away from impulse, right, you are not selling them on monthly consumption. Like the urban, largely the salaried class, do this monthly shopping behavior. They don't have that in rural. They get money in bulk. They go months without making money, then they make money again. That's the cycle is different. So therefore, they buy for today's consumption, not for monthly consumption. That is also a reason why you should plan for accessibility and lower priced units, so that you are catering to the behavior of the consumer and not getting them to change the behavior for you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Excellent. Okay. What's the next one?
The fourth one is a little philosophical, is that trust is the true infrastructure.
Okay. Wow.
Because we talk about roads, electricity, godowns in rural and all that. But I was mentioning this earlier also. The retailer gives credit to the customer. He knows the customer. He knows where the customer lives. He knows when they will be able to pay him back. There is, you just mentioned, right, the van sales doing same day collection.
Yeah.
Not all brands can do same day collection. They will do one beat, they will collect 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. So that comes primarily on trust, because there's no way you can hold them to it. Now, if one local panchayat leader endorsing your van distributor goes extremely long way than you even carrying the top product. So that is the trust. The brands that build these trust networks, right? So they are the ones that actually manage to do this penetration work fast. You can appoint distributors, stockists, set up van distribution, but it is primarily the trust factor which will enable every other factor in your business.
That is true. That is true. So beyond the physical distribution, there is this feel and transparent, invisible distribution that really drives the currency there. Points. Yeah. Pretty powerful points, actually. Let me try and recall and summarize. So, you spoke about the fact that rural distribution should be something that everybody must be interested in because of the sheer size that it has and the kind of growth potential that it possesses. So, therefore, all brands, whether traditional or new, should be interested in rural distribution if they really want to unlock India's growth in India. Then you spoke about four principles or four realities of rural India that brands must embrace rather than trying to solve for. Or so therefore, first was fragmentation, right? Fragmentation is supposed to be embraced rather than treated as an anomaly. You will have lower density of retailers and therefore design for them rather than fight it. Second is smallness, scale in smallness, which is about the fact that each one of these outlets that you find will buy smaller quantities, and then that is how the economy is built. You build scale out of that rather than trying to dump a lot of stock into each outlet. Third piece is design for accessibility. So if you're able to make good aspirational brands accessible, that's how you crack the rural market. Rather than making brands specifically for them that might not have any aspirational value. And last but not the least is a philosophical point, which is you ride on trust and not on trucks, right? And it's that invisible network of trust that drives the currency in rural rather than a network of shops, a network of physical network that flows through. So pretty
Absolutely.
powerful points. Yeah. Thank you. It's a
Thank
lovely
you,
one.
Sudeep. And if you see distribution, rather, if you see rural distribution with these factors in mind, right, it will actually stop being a problem. You'll start seeing the opportunity in the market here.
Yeah. Okay. And so, Sharon, before we say goodbye to our listeners, I think we should do one more episode where we talk about brands that have either cracked rural distribution or the ones that have cracked under the pressure of distribution, right? And maybe the learning that all of our brand enthusiasts can take out of some of these case studies.
Sure. Let's do that. next episode.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's CoBBcast.net.